Hello everyone, and good afternoon or good evening, depending on from where you're joining us. Thank you so much for coming along to this webinar discussing research as a transferable skill, preparing researchers with skills that are transferable to a range of careers and professions. We should take about 45 minutes of your time, including the designated question and answer session at the end. If you are familiar with GoToMeeting, you know that there is a question option as part of the panel on the right-hand side of your screen near the bottom. If you would like to ask questions as they occur to you, please feel free to send them over and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. We are recording this webinar, so if you wish to view it again or share it with your colleagues, it will be available on Epigeum's YouTube page next week. At the moment, you are all on mute to avoid background noise. But again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the panel on the right. Now, just a couple of introductions. That's me, Anne-Marie Turner, on the left-hand side. I'm the marketing manager for Epigeum's research program. Julio Rivera and Sarah Andrus are working on the development of research as a transferable skill. I will let them now introduce themselves.
Sure, thanks Anne-Marie. My name is Julio Rivera and I am a professor of management, marketing, and geospatial science at Carthage College in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Thank you, Julio. And Sarah?
Hello, I'm Sarah Andrus and I'm a commissioning editor for Epigeum at Oxford University Press. And I'm working with Julio on developing this new program, Research as a Transferable Skill.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today. Next, just a quick the agenda before we get started. First, I will provide a bit of background on Epigeum itself. Next, we will move on to Julio's presentation on the background and vision of our program, Research as a Transferable Skill. Then Sarah will give an overview of the program and how development groups work. Finally, we will wrap up with a question and answer session. Epigeum was founded in 2005 as a spin-off from the Imperial College London. Our two founders created the company in response to what they felt was a lack of timely support for researchers. One of our founders was doing his PhD at the time while also working full-time when he came across issues that he wanted and needed to be advised on. The courses he was taking would either be a face-to-face course that took place 3 months later or an inadequate, dated, and boring material that was available online that didn't quite fit with what he needed. He saw this as an opportunity to work with universities to create supported materials for researchers, particularly PhD students and postdocs like himself, that gave just-in-time support for all those issues. And that's where Epigeum started. It's been more than 10 years since, and we have expanded with our studying program, which includes courses for students, and our teaching and leadership programs, which are intended for staff and professionals. Epigeum was acquired by Oxford University Press in May 2015. Since OUP is a division of Oxford University, Epigeum is still a non-for-profit organization in a higher education context and still very much focuses on creating high-quality materials. To date, in the decade since we have formed, we've created over 92 online courses across 19 different programs, and we have currently 7 in develop, one of which is Research as a Transferable Skill. Epigeum is a globally focused organization, and we work with over 260 universities across 30 different countries worldwide to date. I would like to briefly touch on how this course can be used for your institution. Firstly, it can be used as a standalone academic course. You can supply the students with an online, multimedia-rich course immediately at the time and the place you need it. This would be in a self-study mode. The advantage here is that you can make the course quite personal and release training on demand, so that it is the most flexible option of the 3. Secondly, we have the option for tutor-supported online courses. There is plenty of supplementary material available as part of each course, which can be used by tutors to enhance the course. Tutors can be used to provide feedback that cannot be provided by computers. They can work on community-based features, give motivational messages, etc. So there's a whole tutoring side to this course that can be used if you have the tutors. The advantage here is that the course is allowed to be more effective, but you would lose the flexibility as you would tend to have in a fixed start and end time. Finally, and the most common use of our courses and programs is that it can be used as part of a blended learning program. Typically how this works is that the students are given access to the online course ahead of a workshop, and then the workshop would really focus on consolidation and application of the material. This is considered to be maybe the most effective pedagogically, but also the least flexible. Thus, from here you have a spectrum of the most flexible to the most pedagogically effective. You can also implement the course in all three modes at once. So together, these three methods of implementation provide you with quite the armory to get your students the support and knowledge they require. Now that you have a bit of background about Epigeum and how we put our programs together, I would like to give it over to Julio to present on the vision of research as a transferable skill.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. What I want to do is move in and talk a little bit about where I'm heading in my portion of the webinar. And first of all is to simply describe who I am and what my role is as the lead advisor. Talk a little bit about who would use the program, why is it important, and some of the visions that I hope the program will be. We're in the development stages at the moment, and so you know, we're building this and also listening to what people are asking for as well. So I'll be interested in some of your questions at the end of the session. Talk a little bit about myself. I have worked in a number of contexts in higher education. Certainly as a faculty member in 2 different departments, working as a research mentor to students, and primarily undergraduate students in my work. I do a lot of consulting on the outside to other schools, primarily to help faculty build undergraduate research programs, and more importantly to build their capacity to do that. In other words, how do you increase the number of undergraduate research experiences within your department or place? I've been an active member of the Council on Undergraduate Research for a very long time. I had the privilege of serving as president for a year. It's a large organization of 10,000 members, over 700 member institutions, and really is the leading voice on undergraduate research. And so I've had the privilege of working with a number of the leading thinkers in the area, and so that's been a great benefit for me. The last thing I have been is I've been a chief academic officer. So not only do I know what it's like to be a mentor on the front lines, I also know what it's like to find the resources or find the structures that will allow undergraduate research to happen. So there are a lot of roles I've played in different places that give me some background in the area. On a larger stage, this project comes at a really interesting time. I think that there's a lot of ideas that are kind of hitting the stage at the same time. So the first part is to think about the challenges of research with students and what they need. And what students are looking for, as they tell us, they're looking for an ability to be successful after they leave college, which is not much different than what we've always tried to do for them, but they're more vocal in this need. And I think that we're being called more seriously to pay attention to that. And it's not that we didn't pay attention to it before. I think it's just become a bigger part of the conversation. We're also faced with a variety of regulatory agencies or even just simple needs within departments to better prepare our students to be ready to do research with us. And we have to face all those external constituencies in a variety of ways. And so this particular program, I think, addresses that and provides resources that I don't think are out there in a succinct package in the community. I want to talk a little bit about undergraduate research as a practice in higher education. And we've talked about it in a variety of ways, but one of the ways that it's often talked about is as a high-impact practice. And I'm a great believer in high-impact practices, but what I often disdain is how people talk about them. It's often used as a cliche. And one of the things to remember about a high-impact practice and why it's a high-impact practice is of all the great things that we do in higher education, and there are a number of things that we do, the high-impact practices, and you'll see them on the next slide in a minute, the high-impact practices have the most profound impact upon students. And this impact is measured not just in terms of what we think they do or what we think it's happening with them, but the actual research data about student growth and student development. And one of the things it says is that the largest impacts for high-impact practices are first-generation college students and underrepresented groups. These are intellectual development and skill building and personal responsibility. And so one of the things that we're looking for is to have a program and that helps you facilitate these kinds of development outcomes in your students. On the next slide, I'd like to just kind of remind you what the 10 high-impact practices are, and I have them all here for a particular reason. I am a great fan of these across a curriculum, but one of the things is I often talk about undergraduate research as being the high-impact practice that the other high-impact practices can settle underneath. And so one of the things is that you can have learning communities that are undergraduate research. Internships can be research internships. Many research experiences are collaborative projects. Often they appear as capstones. They certainly are writing intensive. So I think one of the things is that if you're looking at a range of high-impact practices, undergraduate research becomes a good umbrella to keep them under. Just to remind us a little bit about some of those impacts. You know, one of the things that students often report is that they have a deeper learning of their subject once they've done the research. Their grades are improved. I'm a great believer in two forms of student development, both the intellectual development and the psychosocial development, and that this is authentic learning. This is learning that is student-driven and not necessarily driven from you know, a set or list of things to remember or learn. It is students learning how to learn when they do research. We are, as academics, I think, predisposed to say our students are successful when they do well, and they're really successful when they go to graduate school. And I will be the first to kind of say that, and I could point to my students that have gone on to graduate school and say, these are great students and I'm really proud of them. But one of the things that most of our students are not doing is they're not going to graduate school, and oftentimes not because they're not capable, but because they choose not to. And I can think of some of my very best students choosing not to go to graduate school. And in that context, one of the things I think that is important is some of the work that AAC&U, the Association of American Colleges and Universities, which is one of the leading voices in the country about higher education and particularly liberal education. They've commissioned a survey from the Hart Group that has talked about the relationship between what students do in undergraduate research and the kinds of experiences that they have. And the survey was not about that specifically. And what employers are looking for and what students are looking for. And so that completing a significant project before graduation both improves the quality of preparation for students for life after college, but it also is something that employers think would be most helpful. And on the next slide, too, students think, 89% of students agree that doing this kind of work increases their likelihood of being hired. In other words, It's good for us because we like to do it with students. It's good for the students. They think it's important, and employers think it's important because they understand the types of student-related skills that come out of this kind of experience. But there's a problem. And the problem's a real one, and it's one that I'm sure you face in your institution, I certainly face in my institution, it's a capacity problem. Gosh, I'd like to do this, but you know what? There's just only so much, of me to go around. And even though it's good for students, and I know my administration wants me to do more, I just don't have the time, I don't have the energy, etc. And so one of the things is, how do you do more? And I will argue too that for many schools, thinking about undergraduate research as simply a summer program or thinking about it as simply a set of independent studies, most schools have pretty much reached their capacity in that framework. And so what the prevailing thought is now is that research and undergraduate research is woven into the curriculum in different ways. And this could be in the form of a senior capstone course, which is, I think, the most common way people think about it. But in many ways, it can be a first-year student course. It can be a sophomore level course. If you begin to embed research within the curriculum and research type classes in the curriculum, it becomes a different learning experience. Much of this work comes out of work from the NSF, and one of the more intriguing pieces, I think, in this notion of a research-rich curriculum comes out of the work that's been funded by the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, where introductory bio courses are substituted with research-level courses, and students learn intro bio through research. And it's been a very large program. It's called the Phage Hunters program, and has built a cadre of schools that are redefining undergraduate biology curriculum. And it's being emulated by other departments in different ways. And it's, if I think about one of the ways I'm asked to do different workshops at other schools, it's asking this question about the research-rich curriculum. If you want to think about this more strategically, this is a moment when we can engage students earlier. It is, and we know that engaging them earlier is a better developmental sequence. It is one of those things where we get to think of them as an undergraduate scholar. It does not mean that they are a true scholar, which is different. My students doing research in the classroom are, I will argue to you, they're not ready for prime time. But what they are learning is that they are learning the discipline, they are learning what they need to learn to do the work that they need to do, but they're also learning to think about data, think about statistics, think about inference, think about literature reviews, think about methodologies. They are putting together this notion of research, which is not only important for them in graduate school, but also for the companies that they'll probably work for later. The other problem we have is that we just need better resources. I think when I go out and I talk to different groups of faculty, they ask me, well, do you have something that we could use? Do you have something that would help us structure our research program with our students in different ways? And I'll be honest with you, I'm usually short on that. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm interested in this particular program. I would like to be able to say, yes, and here's how you would use this program. Here's where it is. And you want to think about resources that hold students to high standards, talk about research, talk about the things you want them to learn. And you can use this particular program in a variety of contexts. So if I think about how I would use this program, I can think of it in a number of ways. if I'm running a summer undergraduate research program, one of the things that I would do is select particular modules from the proposed program and say, before you arrive on my campus, you will have completed these modules and you will be ready to go. That adds time to the lab experience, to the research experience, to the field experience. However you're running your experience, it adds time to that you ordinarily would not have had because your students are prepared outside of your summer program. If I have students and we have a required senior thesis here, for a senior thesis, it is always a struggle and a mystery for students on how to put these things together. Even though we've gone over this in different ways throughout our curriculum, this is a moment when a resource like this would be really helpful. Certainly, it would support any curricular models, embedded undergraduate research. I teach 2 embedded undergraduate research courses, one in statistics, one in marketing principles, where students really could use better resources to think about the research side. And the last piece is a lot of us still do independent studies for different reasons, and in doing that, this resource would be supportive of it. I'm happy to talk more about some of the visions of the program, but these are the basic ideas that that the program will embody. And so with that, I'll turn this over to Sarah.
Thank you so much for that, Julio. Sarah, would you like to start on your section, the proposal for a new training program for Epigeum?
Absolutely. Thank you, Julio, and thank you, Anne-Marie. So I'm going to start just by talking a little bit about our approach to research training from a big picture perspective. So really our goal is to, well, from a behavioral perspective, we understand that one size does not fit all for the wide range of users and learners who require different types of training at different career levels. So our goal is to publish these courses in such a way that courses can be mixed and matched in a modular fashion to meet the needs of diverse use cases, which is illustrated on this slide here. So for example, an undergraduate researcher with no experience who's doing a project in social sciences, for example, will need some ethics training, which might come under the responsible conduct of research column, as well as some basic research skills training covered in the Research as a Transferable Skill program, but they wouldn't need training in things like lab safety and human subjects, being a social science researcher. So in this way, we ensure that the training that we provide is not only robust and comprehensive, but also always relevant to the learner. Nobody wants to spend more time training than they need to, so we want to make sure that every piece of training we provide is, again, absolutely relevant and very impactful. So of course, just to bring it back to what we're talking about today, research as a transferable skill. And this is the program that we're currently developing for the undergraduate market primarily. Just some context about transferability, and this goes back to a lot of what Julio was talking about. So this is some information from an organization called the Institute for the Future. And these are what they've identified as the top 10 work skills, proficiencies that employers are increasingly seeking in their employees, whether those are recent college graduates or at any level in their careers. And so you can kind of quickly see that a lot of these skills really do emerge from experience in conducting research, because a lot of what goes into research is not just proficiency in conducting a research project itself, but what are those other skills and competencies that build into that? So things like teamwork, adaptive thinking, critical thinking, design mindsets, collaboration, communication. These are all things that if we can teach research skills in a way that maximizes transferability of competencies, then we've created researchers who are well prepared for a career in graduate school or elsewhere. Those skills can be taken with them in a number of different contexts, and they are then empowered to enter the workforce with those skills intact. And so this is, again, the program that we're going to soon be developing with the collaboration efforts of a number of universities who we hope to join in our development group, which I'll talk about in just a minute. So this program doesn't yet exist, but we are working on it, and Julio and our other lead advisor, Nick Stenek, are advising us on this program, which we will roll out over the next year or so in a collaborative fashion. And so the overall objectives are to teach undergraduates, as well as some master's students, to conduct research, certainly to learn those basic research skills, but also to think of research not just as a project level skill, but as something that contains a number of different competencies that are really very transferable. And that also goes into career planning. So as I said, this is primarily a course for undergraduate students, but there will also be other cohorts that may benefit. And of course, to the institution, it's, as Julio mentioned, the increased focus on high impact practices is something that a lot of institutions are very interested in rolling out across their curricula. And so in this way, the institution can support their students, empower them to take on more challenging projects, and solve one of the largest problems in higher ed, which is really making sure that a college education, which often can be very expensive, is highly relevant and will empower graduates to take not just their knowledge, but their skills out into the world. And so here's just an example of how we might structure the course. And this is, of course, always being iterated and refined. We've been running a number of workshops in which that we've received some really powerful feedback from actual research administrators and other thought leaders who are helping us to refine how we actually will structure this program. And so going forward, as we build our development group, we will actually have a workshop where we'll get together with all of the members of the development group and sit down and actually start thinking about how we're going to roll this out. So the purpose of a development group is to make sure that our programs are absolutely relevant and truly reflect the training needs of students. We don't assume that we have all the answers ourselves in-house. And so that's why we work with universities to advise us and actually help us to create that content. So we work with authors, reviewers, and thought leaders who collectively share their expertise with us, and we iterate and we iterate, and when we work with that collaboration group, we eventually publish the best possible version of the program. So I just wanted to say one more thing, which was we are currently seeking collaborators for this program. So anyone who would like to join our development group, certainly welcome to reach out to me. I could certainly send more information, but this is the process, and we think it works really well just to make sure that all of our programs are absolutely the best they can be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you so much, Julio, for participating today. Now we're moving on to the question and answer portion of the webinar, and please, everyone out there, feel free to send in any questions. We've gotten one or two throughout the presentation. I think, Julio, this one would be meant for you. How would you use this program in your own work at your own school?
I think there are a number of ways that I'm envisioning, being able to use this. I think the primary way for us is within the senior thesis and having it as the backdrop of how to move students through the conceptual pieces of the senior thesis. And there are obviously resources out there that do that, but one of the things that I like about the Epigeum material in other courses is the interactive nature of the program, the fact that there are videos of students talking about the experience. You know, there's a range of media that that I think will help students engage into the process a little bit more easily. I think I mentioned earlier that some of the other ways that I might use it is if I'm working as independent study, if I'm running a summer undergraduate research program and I want students to be at a certain competency level by the time they hit my office or lab in the summer. In other words, it really supplants a lot of the time that that I would use and to explain something myself, and not that I'm not willing to explain something myself, but I can focus them in deeper areas more quickly.
Thank you so much for answering that, Julio. One more that came across was, why does this make sense to use in the context of today's students?
You know, I'll be honest with you. I'm one of those people who, you know, thinks our students are in many ways similar as they were 20 years ago in terms of their development, but culturally they have a different set of expectations. And so one of the things that students expect is they expect a higher level of technology from faculty. They expect to be able to access a number of their documents and resources online. And and again, this course is in development, but the other Epigeum courses that I've looked at, the way they're set up, they are set up in a way that is full of content, full of rigor, but also full of resources that you know, create engagement, draw students in a little bit more, bring examples home a little bit clearer, and allow students to spend a little bit more time on task. It's the kind of thing that I think students expect at this point that makes it a better product.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Julio. I think now that we don't have any more questions, but don't be shy to reach out, because contact Epigeum for any information at info@epigeum.com. And again, Sarah mentioned that if you have any questions about the development group itself, you can reach out to her. Her email is on the screen, sarahandrus@oup.com. Or you can always visit our website to find out more about our company, our development groups, and the programs that we already have. So remember, we will be sending out this presentation so that you can either share it with the relevant colleagues who may find this of interest, or rewatch it again if you have any other questions. I just want to thank you so much for attending this webinar today. And thank you very much to Julio and Sarah for their wonderful presentations. It was super informative. I hope that you all have a great rest of the day, and we really look forward to hearing from you. Thanks again.